Hello, I am so thankful that you all have joined us for another relationship ministries seminar. We're on part two of our intimate conversation series, and we're going to jump right in today with introducing to you all two very special individuals that I have that are on the broadcast with us today to share with us. Listen, no matter where it is you're watching from, if you are watching, why don't you do us a favor and why don't you share this on your timeline so that your friends, your family can engage in the conversation with our presenters. I know there's so much going on in the world, and we're going to pray before we begin. There's so much going on in the world. I thought for a little while about whether or not we postpone this or cancel this, but we know that there are people that are in their homes, that they're struggling, they're suffering in their marriages, in their relationships, in their friendships. And we thought that this was such an important conversation for us to have. And so we're here even through this tough time. And I want to just take this opportunity to welcome our guests. Our guest presenters for today, they are none other than Oliver and Denise Marcelle. I'm going to talk a little bit about them, just introduce you all to them. Denise and Oliver Marcelle are the founders of Denoli LLC, where they do speaking, facilitating, mentoring, and coaching. They've been married for 19 years and they have 3 children. Even before starting Denoli, Oliver and Denise would find themselves mentoring couples, sharing their marriage testimony, or even giving advice to singles. So out of a desire to be an encouragement to couples, they began blogging in 2013. The blog, Marriage is Our Ministry, was created to share their ministry journey in hopes that it would resonate with readers and allow them to see that they're not alone in their journey. The blog was intended to be the only means of sharing, but Oliver and Denise quickly realized that God had other plans and was calling them to do more. They started getting requests to speak to married couples, and as a result, they've had the opportunity to speak on marriage and relationship building in several states. They've been guests on radio shows and podcasts. They've spoken at churches, facilitated group discussions, presented seminars that they've designed. The most requested is entitled Extreme Marriage Makeover. That sounds very exciting. Through seminars, a podcast, videos, and social media posts, Oliver and Denise offer a candid look into their own marriage with the goal of being with the goal being to encourage couples and help them explore, grow, and learn together. Marital relationships is their passion, and it's Oliver and Denise's desire and mission to ultimately guide couples into a relationship that mirrors the relationship that Christ has with his church. Listen, I want to welcome both you, Oliver, Denise. We've known each other a long time, ever since I was a little pup at Andrews. But I want to welcome you all to the broadcast. And before we even allow you all to say a word, I want to affirm you all for all the good work that you all are doing. For those people that don't watch your podcast, that don't watch your Thursday conversations that you all have every Thursday, listen, you're missing out. And so just greet the people and let us know some things about you, and then we'll pray together, and then I'll turn the time over to you.
Wow, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
That's a great welcome. Much appreciated. Yeah. We're just excited to be here, right? We just love to talk about conversation. We love to talk about communication. We love to talk about all things relationships. Right? So this is kind of our element. We could talk about this forever and a day. And so we're just glad to have the opportunity to share with some folks. And basically for us, right, it comes out of our experience. And I'm not going to say that makes us unique in this space, but 99% of what you hear us say is going to be stuff that we've actually
experienced or dealt with.
Right. And that we've discovered throughout the 19 years. And so I feel like that helps because you get to see that you're not in it by yourselves. We're on this journey, just like you're on this journey. And as we learn, we just have been commissioned to share. And so that's what we're going to do.
All right, well, let me pray with you guys. And then by all means, if you're online, if you're watching right now, please, we're going to try our best to facilitate this discussion and move this discussion along as you type your live comments on Facebook and YouTube. We'll put them up. Please feel free to engage in the conversation in the chat, and let us know also if you're watching. Let us know where you're from. And by all means, if you have any questions for Denise and Oliver toward the end of their presentation, we're going to take live questions from our audience. Let me pray for you all real quick. Father in heaven, we thank you, God, for your mercies. We thank you for your grace. Father, I want to pray for Denise and Oliver right now, God, as they share with our online audience these tools that they have for communication, and then be with those who are listening. Father, we know that there's someone out there that is tuned in, that are struggling in their marriage, in their relationships, dating. Father, we pray that this information will not only speak life and health to them, God, but it will give them the practical tools that they need to make their relationship all that they need it to be. Father, we love you and we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Amen. Amen.
Man, this is good. So
here we are. We're going to talk about communication.
Right, which is a big thing for us, right? So if anybody who's ever spent any time around us, who's ever listened to us at any point in time, whether it be podcast, video, whatever, they've heard us say these 3 words. And what are those 3 words?
Have a conversation.
Have a conversation. And so we're just going to talk a little bit about having a conversation, and in particular, an intimate conversation. Now we'll touch on, conversations that are tough or that are tense and that kind of thing. And we'll go through some things that we've learned as it relates to how to handle those kinds of conversations as well. But let me just say this before we jump in. If you are watching, we love comments. We thrive on the comments.
Interact with
We
us.
want you to engage with us. If this was a live session, if we were in the room with you, we would be doing a lot of walking around and a lot of pointing and a lot of pulling people out. And we can't do that now. So we want you to do that for us by being in the comments. So I'm going to start off with a question, and I want those who are watching to answer this question in the comments. Should you be able to talk to your spouse about everything and anything? If you agree with that statement, say yes. If you disagree with that statement, say no. I'm not even going to say there's a right or wrong answer. We just want to know what you think, right? We want to know if you feel like you can talk to your spouse. Well, not even if you feel like you should be able to. We want to see that in the comments. So we see somebody says yes. What do you think? Do you feel like we should be able to talk? Should I be able to talk to you about everything?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Why?
Because you are my most trusted individual. I'm the one that I can be the most vulnerable with. I'm the one that you can be the most vulnerable with. You're the one that I can be the most vulnerable with. If I can't talk to you that vulnerably, who else can I talk to? Okay. So I feel like, yes, we should be able to talk to our spouses about anything. I should be able to come to you intimately and not feel like you're going to tear me down or ridicule me or anything like that, because you are my safe space. And so I should be able to talk to you about anything. So why
do you think, and you guys can answer this as well, and I'm seeing people in the comments saying, yes, you should. Yes. Okay. So there's some folk that agree that you should be able to. Why is it, and I'm asking you guys as well, why is it difficult then for us? And so that you know, right, you're going to get some transparency from us. So we're really going to be talking about us. And we hope that as we talk about us, that you are able to glean some things as a result. Brad said, yes, everything, but not every detail. Interesting. Okay. And we may touch on that. That's a good comment. I like that. So why is it difficult for us to sometimes have a conversation when we know that we should be able to talk to each other about everything? We should be vulnerable.
Yeah, I think.
But there's some difficulty there. Why?
I think a lot of times, well, it could be for a number of reasons. One reason is obviously the enemy doesn't want us to get closer. And by becoming intimate and talking and being vulnerable, then we're going to ultimately become closer. Of course, the enemy doesn't like that. But I think, too, it can be unresolved past history, maybe that we had that we didn't maybe I felt some kind of way when I talked to you about something before because of your response, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that, or it could just plain be something in either one of our past that we just, just the way we grew up or the way we've gone through life. That's just something I can't talk about, not even with my spouse. It could be a number of reasons, I think.
That's good. Somebody said ego as well.
Ego,
and I think
absolutely.
sometimes that does play a part as it relates to why it's difficult for us to have these conversations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about, this is a different conversation altogether, but we talk about with a lot of groups, intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And often when you hear the word intimacy, we automatically move to like physical and sex,
Mm-hmm.
right? But there are 5 areas that we've learned, and especially throughout this COVID-19 scenario, because we are now living a different reality.
Mm-hmm.
Even from the rest of the 19 years that we've been together, we're living a different reality because of the circumstances that are in place as a result of this.
Yeah.
And we've learned that there are 5 areas
Mm-hmm.
of intimacy that we had to really be intentional about working on. And one of those is conversation.
Yeah.
Right. And conversation kind of falls into a couple buckets.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that we're going to highlight today is going back to the question about difficulty and why you feel like it might be difficult. Often we don't know how our spouse really communicates.
That's good.
All right. We've been talking to them,
Mm-hmm.
or we've been talking at them.
Yeah.
I've been talking to you. I've been talking at you, but I haven't really taken the time to discover what kind of communicator I really am.
Yeah.
And what kind of communicator you are.
Yeah.
And then working out a plan to make those two things work
together. Yeah.
Right. So we're going to share 4 communication styles. Now, obviously, there are probably more, and hopefully this will kind of get the ball rolling with you so that you can determine, you might not be any of these 4,
right,
but this could help you kind of begin to articulate the type that you are to your spouse. So we'll talk about 4 of them, right? What's the first one?
So the first one is the procrastinator. The procrastinator, that's me, is a person that doesn't necessarily communicate right away. The procrastinator has to think about how they're going to respond and think about what they're going to say and take into consideration how you're going to feel when I say what I say. They have to process in their mind first what they're going to say. So they're not going to come up front and initiate a conversation when the situation calls for it. They're not going to come up front right away and start talking about whatever is on their mind. They need time to think about it. They need time to process and just lay it all out in their mind first.
Okay.
And so they procrastinate in the sense that they just got to make sure that it's all straight in their mind. They processed everything that they're feeling and that they're thinking and take into consideration what their spouse might be feeling and thinking as well.
Okay, that's good. And for those of you who are watching, right, I should have said this in the beginning, and thank you. They're putting it up on the screen as well. Go ahead and type in the comments, procrastinator, for those who may not be paying attention right now. Hopefully everybody's paying attention. But procrastinator is the first thing. And we're talking about intimate conversations, right?
Yeah.
So for someone who's a procrastinator, that could, I hate to use the word hindrance, but that could kind of hinder an intimate conversation.
It could hinder it or at least delay it.
Delay it. That's a fantastic word.
Yeah.
It could delay a conversation. And we'll talk about how we deal with those kinds of things, right? We have the 3 T's, and we'll end with that, the 3 T's. But procrastinator, so that's the person who needs some time to process. And we're learning this throughout our own experience, right? So my wife is a procrastinator, and it's funny because it caused problems in the beginning of our relationship, and you'll understand why as we go through the other 3. But it caused problems in our relationship because let's say it was an issue that we were dealing with, and this issue came up today. She wouldn't be able to talk about it today.
Yeah.
Not only would she not be able to talk about it today, she would not, it could be days before she came back to the table, so to speak. And you already know what happens, right? When somebody who's not a procrastinator is waiting on a procrastinator to speak or to talk or to engage in conversation. Mm-hmm. There's so many things that were going through my mind, right. So many scenarios that I'm playing out, mm-hmm. right? And so many things that I'm beginning to unfortunately act on that haven't even manifested themselves just because I'm in my head. Mm-hmm. So I say all that to say, for a person who's a procrastinator, and let me say this, let me be clear on this. I do not believe, as it relates to what we're going to talk about today, that any of these are right or wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? People are who they are.
Right.
What we believe is that you have to learn who you are, mm-hmm. and then come up with a game plan together to make who you are work for the relationship. Right. Right. Mm-hmm. So in saying that, how do we deal with a procrastinator as it relates to intimate conversations? What does the procrastinator need to do? And what does the person who's waiting on the procrastinator need to do?
They have to know that they're a procrastinator. Like, you have to know, you had to learn that is what was preventing me from speaking right away. Mm-hmm. So you had to learn the communication style, and then you have to kind of pull things out of me. It's kind of like a balance. You have to kind of pull things out of me in a balancing type of way. And we have to also communicate again about, well, babe, that's not my style. I need a little bit more than that. Understand, though, that, I'm not going to be able to be forthcoming unless we have a conversation first and come to an agreement on how we're going to meet in the middle, mm-hmm. type thing.
And I would piggyback on that to say that what we've learned is that the procrastinator also has to be intentional about closing the gap.
Yes.
So in our situation, it could be 2 weeks before we have this conversation. And finally, I had to go to her and be like, listen, I get it now. I understand this is how you are. I respect it. I'll give you the time to process. Can you help me?
Right.
By not taking 2 weeks to come back? I'm not trying to force your hand. I'm not trying to push you in any way, but if at all possible, can we speed up the processing?
That's why I said meet in the middle type
time.
Thing.
Right. Can we speed up the processing period of time so that maybe let's give it 6 days, and so there's some give and take as it relates to how you go about this.
Yeah.
Lenore said, talk more on this type of communication because it's real. It is real.
It is
real. And it is how a lot of individuals go about expressing themselves.
Yeah.
They cannot come right out. They cannot shoot back an answer.
It's real. It
right.
is so real.
You're right. There isn't wit involved. There isn't this. And we'll talk about who I am because I'm the polar opposite of that. So there is not this fiery kind of, I can come back at you.
Yeah.
People need the time to ingest, right? And to process, and then to come back to the table with some sense of, even if not sense of clarity, with an opportunity to at least have gone through the process of understanding what it is and being able to verbalize and articulate correctly.
Honestly, I think that it all boils down to, as far as a procrastinator, well, all of them, mm-hmm. I think it all boils down to understanding mm-hmm. on both partners' sides and compromise.
Yes, good word.
And also, it boils down to understanding, compromise, and then putting the good of the relationship before, well, that's just how I am. You're going to have to deal with it. Like, right. How do you want your relationship to pan out? Because obviously, if we're going to butt heads about our communication styles, that's not doing any good for the relationship. Do we want this relationship to work or not? Then we're going to have to get to the point where we display understanding and compromise.
Yep.
Because God made us different for a reason. Right? So mm-hmm. I have to respect and honor who God made you. right? And he made you not to be a shotgun or not to be a procrastinator like me.
You're giving stuff away.
I know. I'm sorry. So he made you that way, and I gotta honor that, and I have to work with that and ask God to help me to work with that.
And the flip side of that is, although there is an obligation to accept, right? There is an obligation on the part of the other spouse to evolve.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So just like in your case, right? Procrastinating, it took a long period of time for you to process.
Yeah.
And as the years have gone by, you've evolved, and that time has shortened,
right,
based on the level of intentionality that you have placed,
intentionality,
on getting better at that.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
And I've become more understanding based on the level of intentionality that I've put in to be more understanding. Yeah. Right. So I'm seeing some comments in there. Ed Smith said 24 hours is the recommended time. Brad, will a procrastinator spouse make an immediate opportunity slip by?
Oh,
there is a possibility for that. That's a good question.
Yeah.
And what I would suggest, right? What I would suggest, and then we'll move on to the other ones. What I would suggest in that is your approach to that has to be delicate, right? I believe that if you think an opportunity is going to pass by, and we do not have 24 hours, we do not have 2 days, we do not have whatever the time frame is that your spouse is accustomed to, it is, I believe, my duty to speak up and say, babe, listen, first of all, let me say I'm not pushing you to make a decision, but I just need you to understand what's at stake.
Yeah. And a lot of times too, I think for me, and I guess maybe there are different levels of a procrastinator, because if I see that something's at stake, then I'm probably going to kick things into gear,
right,
a little bit.
And that may be different for different people.
Right. And that's why I say there may be different levels within the procrastinator.
Right. And so for the person who would not have that response, right, I believe that it is it is definitely okay for the other spouse to say, hey, listen, let me just explain to you. All you have to do is listen at this point. I'm not forcing you to do one thing or another. Here's what's at stake. And here, I'll take it even a step further, right? There are times, and this has happened with us, where I've had to just go ahead and decide.
Yeah. Yep.
If it's a decision-making thing, if it's not an issue that we're trying to resolve, if it's a decision-making thing, like Brad said, and there's an opportunity at stake, there are times in our situation where I've had to say, listen, babe, this is what I'm going to do. Yeah. We'll talk about it, right? We'll deal with it as things come up, but this is what I need to do based on the urgency of the situation, right? And I think that that's okay. One more comment and I'll move on. Valerie says, I think the procrastinator may be using this strategy as a form of control. Now, there are people who do that, right? And you got to ask God for discernment as it relates to whether your spouse is using this to manipulate you, or whether this is really their communication style, right? Because I agree with that. Any one of these that we talk about, there's only 3 more we're going to talk about, but any one of these can definitely be used as a tool of to be manipulative. Wow. So that's a great comment.
Good point.
And I agree with that 100%. And we have to be cognizant of that as we go throughout our relationship.
Yeah.
As it relates to us, I know her, and I've learned throughout the years that is not her way of getting back at me. And it's not her way of giving me the quote unquote silent treatment. And it's not manipulative. That's how she is with everything. Even not me. Stuff that happens at work, stuff that happens with the kids, stuff that happens with her side of the family. She just needs a moment to just step back and analyze it and cut it into pieces.
Good word.
And cut it into bite-sized pieces, digest it, and then come back with usually something that is just ridiculously full of wisdom. So you got to know your spouse. You got to know your situation, and you have to look for cues and signs, because if it's manipulative, right, then you're not going to see progression in how you go about communicating. For example, the progression for us is I became more understanding, and I became more compassionate as it relates to accepting her way of communicating. She in turn has made strides to fine tune that processing. So if she was being manipulative, we would still be in the same place now that we were 19 years ago. You would not see progression, because there's no reason for anybody to be intentional about making things better for you if they're trying to manipulate you. So you got to be cognizant of that and look at that. So here's the second one.
Do you want to do this one since I already almost said it? Or do you want to go in?
No, I'm going. We can go in that order.
Okay.
Here's the second one. First one is the procrastinator. Second one is the hoarder. Now, like the procrastinator, they take a long time, but unlike the procrastinator, they may not come out of it. If you think about the show, there was a show called Hoarders, I think, on one of those one of those channels. There was a show called Hoarders. And if you think about it, it's the person who has all of this stuff they accumulate and accumulate and accumulate, never get rid of, right? And you have individuals that, because of whatever reason, because of family of origin reasons, maybe that's how their parents or their family dealt with conversation, and they just kind of held things in and didn't talk that much. I joke about my dad, and he might even be watching this, so it's not a cheap shot, but I joke about him all the time. My dad is a very quiet individual, right? Drives my mom insane at times. And so I always joke about my dad and say, he's 84 years old, right? Over the last 84 years, he's spoken 100 words. And obviously he's spoken more than that, but I joke about that because just to give you an idea of the type of person he is, right? He keeps some stuff in, he internalizes some things, and that's just who he is, right? He's not trying to be manipulative. He's not trying to hide things from the family. That's just how he deals with certain things. And I found myself, even though this is not the type of communicator that I am, I found myself doing that over the years, keeping some things in, shouldering some things. Maybe I feel like, hey, it's my responsibility to deal with it, so I don't need to share it with anybody. Yeah. And that's okay. But what you have to do with those kinds of people is that you have to sometimes, and this is where the give and take of a relationship happens, right? Sometimes we're not willing to do these things for our spouse. Right. And we got to get in a place where we're willing to help our spouse. We're willing to facilitate some things with our spouse. And sometimes you got to ask some questions, right? Yeah. To get some things out of a hoarder. You got to help them unpack, right? If you think about the show Hoarders, at some point, somebody's got to come in and be like, hey, listen, I'm going to help you get rid of this stuff. Yeah. I'm going to help you unpack this stuff. I'm going to help you place these things in the right places.
I'm going to help you get rid of this.
I'm going to help you get rid of it. Yeah. I'm going to help you process it. And so that's what the hoarder is, right? And so we'll move fast because I know we don't have a whole lot of time. But that's what the hoarder is. And dealing with the hoarder, you may have to ask some questions. You may have to, and the types of questions that you ask cannot be questions that make it seem like you're attacking them.
What is your problem?
Because that'll make them even, right. Yeah. That'll make them even become more recluse, right? Yeah. So you're asking questions that allow them to give you their opinion, that allow them open-ended questions that allow them to talk a little bit more. And then you begin to pick some things out and see what's going on with them, right? And as it relates to intimate conversations, if you're trying to have an intimate conversation with someone that's a hoarder, right? You may have to become facilitator for a little while, right? Until that person gets comfortable, right? Hoarders, if you think about hoarders in real life, there's a level of trust that has to be built. Yep. That you're not going to take my stuff and destroy this stuff that's been so important to me that I've held on for so long, right? And so you got to handle with care. Yeah. You got to facilitate those conversations in a way that allows the other spouse to understand, hey, I have your best interests at heart. You can trust me. This is a safe space, and ask them some open-ended questions so that they can now begin to expand and unpack, right? On their own, right? Good. So that's the second one. First one, procrastinator. Second one, hoarder. Third one, non-confrontational.
Non-confrontational. This type of communication is where the person is like, well, whatever you say, I'll just go along with what you say. I'm not trying to make no waves. I'm not trying to cause conflict. So I'll just do whatever you say. It's fine with me, even though they have an opinion, but they don't really necessarily want to verbalize it because they don't want to cause conflict for whatever reason. And so they're just like, I'll just do whatever you say. I'm good with whatever it is that you say.
What's the challenge as it relates to having an intimate relationship? An intimate conversation? What's the challenge when your spouse is non-confrontational, when it's like the yes dear person or whatever you say person? What's the challenge?
I think that with a non-confrontational person, there's the potential for that person to just, really want to say something, but don't want to cause conflict. And so they're holding all of that stuff in. And after a while, it's going to just blow up. Mm-hmm. They're going to explode type thing. And so I think that there's the potential for that explosion to cause, of course, some kind of issue in the relationship. Also, I think the problem could arise where if I was non-confrontational and you were not, mm-hmm. that you would be like, I just really need you to have an opinion on something. I feel like I'm shouldering mm-hmm. all of the weight because I'm trying to get us to be more balanced, but I feel like I'm the one that is shouldering everything.
Okay. I agree with that. And I feel like, and we say this all the time, right? Marriage is strategy. Mm-hmm. There's some strategy involved in mm-hmm. marriage, right? And so dealing with the non-confrontational person, right? Yes, there is going to be a time where you're going to have to say, hey, listen, I need you to step up to the plate, as it were, mm-hmm. in these conversations.
Yeah,
right?
It's just really a fine line, and it's really delicate.
It is delicate. And just like with the hoarder, mm-hmm. I can't approach you as the non-confrontational spouse in a way where it feels like I'm attacking you.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
A great way to deal with the non-confrontational spouse, right, is to give them options. Mm-hmm. Right? So here's a very frivolous example, with us, right? Date night. See, she's laughing already because she already knows. Because I'm the problem a lot of. Well, she is. We're both the problem. So date night, very frivolous example. Date night. One of us will say to the other, if now we're stuck. But yeah. Before COVID-19, we say, okay, what do you want to do tonight? You want to go out to eat? Or if we've established that we are going to go out to eat, let's say we've established we're going to go out to eat, right? What kind of food do you want?
I don't know. What do you feel?
Oh, whatever. Yeah, whatever you say, that's cool. Well, do you want, what do you want? And we would go this back and forth, right? And so finally, one of us would be like, okay, do you want Chinese food or Italian food? Now, whichever one of us is being non-confrontational, if you will, in this conversation, has to make a decision.
Yeah.
Or it forces you to say, no, I don't really like either of one of those. I would probably prefer blah, blah, blah.
So you have to ask direct questions.
You have to ask direct questions.
Where the other person has to give an answer. There's mm-hmm. no open-ended. There's no way to be like, eh.
Right. With the hoarder, you can do some open-ended stuff because the hoarder already has all of the stuff there. Mm-hmm. They just need help unpacking it.
Yeah.
The non-confrontational person doesn't have any of the stuff there. Right. He's just like, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever you want.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Right.
And so with those people, you have to be direct. Brad said, isn't that the ideal on both sides? Say 20% of the time.
To be non-confrontational?
It depends on your relationship.
Yeah.
I think there's probably some elements of that come into play in different conversations.
Yeah.
Right.
Or different aspects of the relationship.
Right. I believe that that's an element that comes into play. But for some of us if that's not our actual everyday communication style, there are some people who that's just for whatever reason, that's how they avoided conflict when they were growing up.
Yeah.
That's how they saw a parent avoid conflict. And they have just taken on that as a style.
Yeah, which happens.
Right. You're going to see that a little bit more than that 20% thing. I think all of us go through that, whatever you say or whatever you think is best kind of thing. We do that all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think that's a little bit different than somebody who this is their main way of communicating. That every time you try to have an intimate conversation with them, that they defer to you.
Yeah.
Which puts everything on your plate, which doesn't allow for the give and take. There's something called intellectual intimacy, right? And in intellectual intimacy, it's that give and take where I'm sharing my feelings, I'm sharing my ideas. She's challenging me on that, and not challenging in a bad way, but just like, hey, have you thought about that? Or what's the pros and cons of this? The non-confrontational, you do not get to experience that level of exchange. Yeah. And so there's some things that you have to do in order to get that person back to the table. Ed said you have to create a safe place. I agree with that. Yeah. You definitely have to create a safe place, regardless of your communication style.
I was going to say over across the board.
Right. If we're talking about having intimate conversations, and we're not just talking about just conversations that might be tense.
Right.
We're just talking about conversations in general, where I'm just sharing my dreams, my hopes. I need to know that you're not just going to crush those. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Even in the intellectual portion of our intimacy, that you're going to be delicate about how this give and take exchange happens. Yeah. Right. So definitely have to create the safe place. So first one, procrastinator. Second one, hoarder. Third one, non-confrontational. And if you remember, she said she's a procrastinator, right? I am the fourth one. Again, a lot of these happen from the way you were raised or the things that you saw happen around you. My mom is this, and this is where I got it from. We call it the shotgun. The shotgun is the person who doesn't think or doesn't feel like they need to process, already has the answer halfway through, and it just comes out. That's me. That has been me. So you can understand why in the beginning of our relationship, we butted heads. Yeah. Because she needed time. I did not need time. Why are you not saying anything? Why are you not talking to me? Why do you not have an answer? Yeah. What is the problem? I talked about this 2 days ago. Why are you still? You see what I'm saying?
You're making me anxious.
That's what happens, right? That's what happens. And so with the shotgun, right? What I had to learn through trial and error, what I had to learn is that, and typically, I'm not going to say every time, right? But with the shotgun, shotguns are often quick thinkers, right?
Yes.
So I'm not saying they have all the answers or the stuff they say is correct, right? 100% of the time, but often they have a quick comeback.
Yep, absolutely.
And so what I had to learn through trial and error is that I had to take a step back. I had to take a millisecond to be like, okay, what I'm about to say, how is this going to play out once it comes out? Because I can't bring it back. Is it going to be beneficial? Is it going to move the conversation along in an efficient and effective way? Or is it going to set the conversation back? Yeah. And that's the thing I had to become very intentional about.
So you had to take a step back, but then I had to take
you had to step forward. Yeah. Right. And so in these intimate conversations that you are crafting with your spouse, understand this, first of all. There is a learning curve.
Absolutely.
Do not get disappointed if these conversations are not going the way you intend for them to go, or you the way you're thinking they should go right from the beginning. This is over time, right? Yeah. These 4 things that we've learned about our communication styles and the things that we tend to fall into from time to time has happened over the course of this journey, right? We've been married 19 years. So there's some things that we learned in year 3, and then we learned some more things in year 5. And I'm saying that to say, develop this atmosphere of learning, right? It doesn't always have to be confrontational. Learn something. She would do something and I'd be like, instead of shooting back at her for what she did, I'm taking a mental note. Okay, that's how she approached that. So what is it that I need to ask of her as it relates to my needs? Yeah. What is it that I need to do as it relates to facilitating her needs and the way she does things? And how can we come to the table together and make that work to win for us? It's not about forcing her to be something different.
Right. And that's the thing.
Right.
Super important to not try to change your spouse. It's impossible. You're not going to be able to do that.
You're right. Don, what's up? I saw Don say, hey, Oliver and Denise, that's my man. Don, how you doing? He said, I missed a comment that he said too. He said, no stigma or judgment zone. Just listen. Very important. Very important. And that's a piece of that we didn't touch on, but that's a piece of a successful, intimate conversation is active listening.
Active listening.
Right?
Yeah.
Being able to listen for understanding.
Right.
Not lawyer
Not
listening. We coined this phrase lawyer listening because it's something that we used to do all the time. Right. So what would happen is this double Dutch kind of listening where she's saying something and her phrase that the idea that she's coming across to me in has 100 words, but by word 25, I'm already like, oh, I know what I got to come back. I already know what I'm going to say.
I know what
and I'm doing this
say,
double Dutch kind of lawyer listening for the sake of rebuttal, but not listening for the sake of understanding. And active listening allows you to take in everything that's being said to you in this intimate conversation and be able to regurgitate it back to your spouse and maybe ask for clarification if you need to, but not waiting to attack. Yeah. Right. Edward said, shotguns are always quick on the draw, but may never hit their target.
That is true.
That's true.
That is true.
And if they hit their target, they decimate it.
Wow. That's really good.
Right? Because think about us in the times that I've shot back. Those were times where you were in a delicate situation. You were in the midst of processing, and I just shattered any progress that we were going to make. Absolutely. Right? And so it's very important really to think about those things. Brad said, will a procrastinator and a shotgun couple allow dreams or creativity to be suppressed? It depends.
I guess it depends. I don't think so in our...
Well, and the reason why I say it depends is because of what I was going to say next. Okay. Right? So the first thing I was saying is that you have to accept that there's going to be a learning curve. Yes. The second thing that has to happen is that each spouse has to be intentional about developing their communication style. So if you think about education, right? In my field and in your field and in everybody's field, over time, you are continuing to elevate. You're continuing to add. Like your field has not changed. Right. But you're continuing to add and you're continuing to develop. Okay. And the way you approach to your field is going to change expand based on the stuff that you bring in. Yeah. Right. It's the same way with the communication style. And we talked about it earlier. As the years have gone on, you have done some work as it relates to your communication style. I have done some work. So to answer Brad's question, yes, there is a possibility that it could do that. But if you are being intentional about moving through the steps, growing your level of intimacy, your communication style may not change, but your approach to that style will change based on how important it is for you, for your relationship to win as a result. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. So those are the four things: procrastinator, and then, like I said, there may be more, right? You may have your own way of articulating how you communicate, but it is important that your spouse knows how you communicate. It's important that you know how your spouse communicates and that you have a conversation outside of whatever the intimate conversation is that you're trying to have, that you have a conversation about those styles in particular. Yeah. So for us, we literally had to sit down and be like, okay, what is it exactly that you need? Right. Right. And that's what it boils down to. How can I help you? Exactly. How can I help you? How can I help you? What is it that you need so that we can make this situation better? Exactly. And we had to come up off of our level of selfishness because when you told me what it is you needed, I couldn't be like, oh, no, I can't do that. Yeah, I'm not doing that. That's too much. Right. But we could have this dialogue about, hey, okay, I hear what you're saying. You need X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
What is it that I can do to help you with that? Mm-hmm. And let me explain to you how it makes me feel when this certain thing happens, and the reason why maybe I say or do what I do, right? You have to hash those things out. It's a team.
It's a team.
If you think about the team, right? If you're a sports person, if you think about a team, I don't think there's any team that goes out onto the field or onto the court and they have not said anything to each other about what the strategy is for this game.
That's good.
No one has ever done that. You see football players in a huddle, or the quarterback with the plays on his arm. You see the guy with the microphone covering up the microphone, whispering the plays. No one gets on the field without some type of strategic plan.
Yeah.
We're just gonna wing it. Mm-hmm. Nobody does that. But for some reason, we do that in relationships.
Yeah.
You gotta have a conversation about the strategy. What is the strategy for us having a successful, intimate conversation? Mm-hmm. What do you need from me? What do you need to hear from me?
Yes.
How far away should we be sitting from each other? How close should we be sitting from each other? What are the boundaries? For us, we're not going to have certain discussions over text message. It's just not going to happen because of another story that we won't get into. But it's just not going to happen. So you have to sit down, devise a strategy so that these things can happen.
Yeah.
And so we'll leave you with this. We'll leave you with 3 things that you have to consider on top of all that what we've talked about. 3 things that you have to consider as it relates to having conversations. We call them the 3 T's. The first one is tone. Mm-hmm. Tone speaks for itself, right?
Watch how you say things.
You've heard it all the time.
Just watch how you say things. And this is not necessarily geared towards wives. I think that a lot of times when we say watch your tone, watch how you speak to your spouse, I think that a lot of people turn their head and look at their wife, but that's not necessarily always geared towards the wife. It's just overall, watch how you say things.
Watch how you say.
Watch your tone. It's everything.
It's not always about what you're saying. It's quite often about how you said it.
And how it's received.
Because
of how you said it.
So think about tone. The second thing is
timing.
And timing, the second one and the third one kind of go hand in hand. So timing for us is, and I tend to do this, I'm guilty of this, and that's why I can speak on it. She will be busy doing something. It's very important.
Yeah. She
will be engaged in whatever that thing is. And I will come to her and expect her to hear, digest, understand, and dialogue with me on something.
Do you know you did that the other day?
I did.
Yeah, okay.
That's why I'm saying it. I know I'm guilty of it. I'm a work in progress. I am guilty of that. Timing, terrible as it relates to timing, and still trying to get better at that. But we have to be cognizant of that, right? Because here's what I'll do, right? When she doesn't engage, when she doesn't digest, when she doesn't interact, now I'm feeling some kind of way. Like, why you ain't listening to me?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, but that's me. That's me not being cognizant of the fact that the timing is bad.
Yeah.
Right. And then the third thing is temperature. Mm-hmm. And temperature, I'll use her as an example as well. Temperature is me coming into the room or coming into the house and about to, just let everything out and look at her and realize that, nope, the temperature's bad.
It's not the time to have this.
Her mood is not ready to receive what I'm about to say unless I devalue having my head attached to my shoulders. Then I can go ahead and proceed if I want to. But if I want to keep my head, I should probably turn back around and go downstairs and let the temperature level off. And so those are the 3 things we want you to think about: tone, timing, and temperature as it relates to having these intimate conversations. You can have a great and effective and valuable and engaging and life-altering conversation if you put in the work, learn your communication style.
Yeah.
develop the strategy for how you're going to approach these conversations, and check your tone, timing, and temperature.
I just wanted to throw in there real quick
Absolutely.
too, that these 4 communication styles, or whatever your communication style is, a lot of times we're fluid in those, in that sometimes I end up being the shotgun. I end up, speaking up and stepping up to the plate right away, where you're the procrastinator, or you're the hoarder, or you're the non-confrontational. So
that's a good
typically
point.
You are who you are, but a lot of times, depending on the circumstance, we're fluid in our communication style, and we end up, for that time being, or for this certain situation, being something other than what is innately in us.
Right. And that's okay. And that almost,
and, okay.
and that kind of speaks to what Brad was saying earlier about, missing the opportunity.
Right.
Because one person may step up, and it's out of character, so to speak, for them to be like, hey, you know what, we kind of got to move on this.
Right.
For these reasons. Right. And even in doing that, you still have to be cognizant of how you're saying it, how it's being received, and making sure that it's not an attack. Right. So those are the few things that we have learned through our experience as it relates to having an intimate conversation, and that conversation being efficient and effective and beneficial to the both of us. So if you guys have questions, Dave, we didn't want to go long. That's pretty much what we wanted to share. So I'll turn it back over to you, my friend.
Listen, that was awesome. Listen, if you're watching this and you have not seen the full conversation that Denise and Oliver just had, please, you can definitely watch the replay of it. But I want you all that are watching, why don't you go on and also share it with someone, because this was some very valuable information. Listen, I want to thank you all for that. You all are definitely, I thank you all for your transparency and talking about your relationship. And so if you do have any questions, I think we have about 5 or 6 minutes left. And so if you have questions, just type them into the comment box, and we'll try to pull our questions, or try to pull the questions as quickly as we quite possibly can. But really quick, can you all just share with us some resources that you all have? I know that I've been on your website, I stalked it, and there's this journal that you all have, this Have a Conversations journal. I'm gonna put it up on the screen. It's gonna cover our faces, but I pulled this off your website. Talk a little bit about the resources that you all have and how people can get in contact with you as they're generating the questions. And if you have any questions about communication in marriage and relationships and dating, go on, type them in as fast as you can so that we can get to them in the next 4 minutes. But talk to us about your resources that you all do have.
So to have a conversation, it's a couple's journal. One journal will be shared between the couple. And in it, there are, is it 12? 10 or 12? 12 topics that we think are kind of typical of conversations that couples typically have. And then there's also space in the back for you to create your own topics. But what you do is there's a his section and a hers section for each topic. And we just wrote down you'll see excerpts from our journal entries on these topics. They're actual entries that we wrote. And it's just a conversation starter. It's not a form of writing down all of your thoughts and then throwing it across the room to your spouse to read, and that's the end of the conversation. It's a conversation starter, because we realize that a lot of times it's very difficult for spouses to initiate conversation. And a lot of times, and I know I'm really this way, it's easier for me to write my thoughts out. And so what we did is we would write our thoughts out and then give it to our spouse to share it with our spouse. And then we would sit down and have a conversation about what the both of us wrote about this particular topic.
Yeah, and it literally was birthed out of the need for us to understand each other's communication style.
Right.
And so I'm like, okay, I'm saying stuff way too quick and it's hurting way too much. Let me just jot down and just let me look at this for a second and see what does it look like to me when I read it back? You know, and the same thing with her. I know that she's a procrastinator. I know that there's some things she needed to write out, and it was really birthed out of that. And then we were like, wait a minute, I feel like other couples would benefit from this.
Yeah.
And so that's really how that was birthed. And you can get it on our website, denoli.org/shop. You can get it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble as well.
All right. And talk to us just a little bit about the podcast. And then I have one question for you that someone texted me. They didn't want to write it, but I will share that question. But talk to us a little bit about the podcast and some other things, and then we'll go on and get out of here. Because I know you all are booked 3 times today.
Yeah, it's cool. No worries. There's several ways that you can connect with us. We have a video series that we do every Tuesday. It's called Short Tips for a Long Marriage. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a very short tip, something that you can incorporate right then and there during the week. The podcast, if you're not familiar with it, Trade Secrets, the podcast is not about us. Right. The guests are outstanding. Like the nuggets, like we just sit in the podcast and just listen. Like, like this is phenomenal stuff. So the podcast, as well as the videos, and our Thursday nights conversation is on Facebook as well. But the podcast, the videos, you can get that by just going to our website. If you go to denoli.org, you can get access to all of those and all of our social media outlets as well.
And merchandise is on the site as well.
All right, awesome. So the one question that I got was, if there's a couple that is not communicating and thinking about divorce, what are some ways that you can help them start having conversations if we haven't spoken for almost 2 weeks?
Wow. I think the first thing I would do is go back to like what initiated this break apart, or the breakdown, like what initiated, go back to there, or even further, what happened, talk about that. What happened? Like you always say, you didn't hate the person that you married. So where did it start to go wrong? And have you ever talked about any of that stuff, and start there?
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say too, right? Here's what I feel like happens, because we've been not on the verge of divorce, but we've been in these ruts where we haven't spoken, right? And typically for us, what has to happen is that our approach to coming back into good graces as it relates to communication, it couldn't start with, well, here's the problem I have. You know what I mean? Because it never really worked for us, right? It always was something that was outside of that particular situation. Because I agree, you definitely have to go back and look at where the breakdown caused, because that's what you're going to have to rebuild, right?
But even before that,
even before that, I would say that those conversations would have to be conversations that are outside of the actual issue. And you also have to be vulnerable. Right? You have to have some level of vulnerability as you approach your spouse, because they may not be ready, but you have to be willing to put yourself in a position to be rejected initially. Because that may happen. And then what you're offering to your spouse cannot be, here's what you did wrong, or this is what the problem is, or here's what you need to do. You have to be offering yourself to your spouse, right? At some point, somebody's got to be the bigger person and say, just the question you asked earlier, what do you need from me? Right? There's some level of vulnerability. There's some level of, we got to get down off of our position as it relates to position versus interest. We got to stand down off of our position for a little bit and offer ourselves so that we can open up that space for that to happen.
Absolutely. Listen, this was awesome. I want to thank you all for this. For those of you who were able to watch, make sure that you watch the replay, that you share it with others, because this was some very valuable information. Just give us parting words to someone who's listening really quick, 30 seconds. Just tell us what you want to leave them with.
I just want everyone to know that relationships don't have to Don't let your disagreements, like you always say, disintegrate. Is that the word? Disintegrate your situation. Find out your communication style. Work with your spouse. Attack the issue and not each other.
That's good. I like it. There's not much else I can say. That, you are a team, and you got to remember that. Approach everything with the team concept.
Yeah.
Look at some of the greatest teams in history if you're a sports fan, and pull some of that stuff into your relationship. The way you strategize, the way you talk, the way you communicate, the way you attack the issue. When 5 people go out on the court, they're not playing each other. They're playing the opponent. Remember that.
And keep God first. Pray.
And keep God first.
Pray.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you all for this. And just before we head offline, let me just share with you all some things that are coming up. On tomorrow morning, it's almost like this is Miracle City weekend. We have David and Cynthia Franklin are with us tomorrow for our Sunday conversations, where they're going to open up about their relationships and share about their love story. And then, of course, on tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock, this is a follow-up to our family and finances conversation that we had a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a month ago. We have Joseph, Troy, and Havis. They're coming back to answer the questions that they were not able to answer. And then, of course, next Saturday, we have the second part of our men's conversation. Last month it was Be the Man. Tomorrow, next Saturday, it will be I'm the Man. We have Uncle Ronnie, Corey, and Jamie coming back again to continue this conversation that they started a couple of weeks ago. And so we just want to remind you all, or let you all know that this is happening. And then the last thing is we have this special conversation for our singles that is happening on June 13th. For all of our information, for all of our previous broadcasts, you can go to our website and you can get all of our previous episodes. We thank you for watching. We thank you for being with us. Denise and Oliver, you all have a great day. Man, I want to appreciate and applaud you all for what you all are doing.
Thank you.
And to our audience, bless you. Have a wonderful evening.
The Relationship Ministries Department of the Allegheny East Conference is a family of ministries that seeks to engage, enrich, and empower families, men, singles, couples, and parents to have healthy and whole relationships. To access the many resources we have available to you, your church, or your family, visit us on the web at www.visitaec.org/relationshipmin.